All right, we are going to get into Unit 2, Lesson 2. I'm on page 5 in the Unit 2 packet. And in Lesson 1, we talked about functions. We talked about domain and range. And the analogy that I gave was that a function is like a machine. Okay, a function is like a machine. So what do? We take a number. Here's my beautiful machine picture, right? I put a number in the machine, and then I do something to that number, right? X is whatever number we put in the machine, and then we get a new number out, and we call that Y. Now, what we're going to talk about today is how we express functions as equations, okay? So we're not going to draw like a machine like this. We write an equation, and these are all examples of functions written as equations. So let's say I call my machine f for function, okay? This is how we write the name, in a sense, of a function. It's called function notation. And we say f of x. So when you see the f and then a parentheses with an x, we say that as f of x. And really, function notation is just another way of writing y, okay? So like here you could say y equals x squared minus 3. It serves kind of the same purpose. But essentially, what this means is that we're calling this function, this machine, f, and we're going to put some number x into the machine, and then this is showing us what we're going to do to our number x. Okay, so in this case, we're going to take whatever x is, we're going to multiply it by 4, and then we're going to add 8 to it. And that's what that first quote-unquote machine does. So today we're going to look at evaluating functions. And essentially that just means plugging numbers in to the function, into the machine. Okay? So when it says evaluate f of 0, just like what it says here, we're going to plug in the given value of x to find the y value. So instead of f of x, it says f of 0. So this says what happens when I put 0 into the machine. So everywhere I see an x in this equation, I'm going to replace it with 0. So instead of f of x, it says f of 0 equals 8 plus 4 times 0. Now, when you're plugging numbers in, I highly recommend that you put a parentheses around that number to help your work stay organized and make sure you understand what it's saying. Now, I also put in bold with exclamation marks and a box around it to follow PEMDAS, follow order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. This one's pretty straightforward, but you'll see like when we get to example 3 later down on the page, a lot of students will mess up the order of operations. So PEMDAS still applies, even though it's something that you talked about like at the beginning of Algebra 1 and even in middle school, PEMDAS is still a thing. So I'm going to do the multiplication. 4 times 0 is 0, and 8 plus 0 is, of course, 8. So when we say f of 0 equals 8, this is saying if I put 0 in and I follow the rules of this function, of this machine, I'm going to get 8 out. My input of 0 gives me an output of 8. Okay, let's try part B. F of 1/2. We can put fractions into functions just like we do any other number. So again, I'm going to change my x's to 1/2. So f of 1/2 equals 8 plus 4 times 1/2. 4 times 1/2 is 2, and 8 plus 2 gives me 10. So f of 1/2 is 10. Okay, I would love for you to pause the video and try part C. So pause the video, take 30 seconds, try part C, and then come back and see how you did. Okay, I hope you took a minute to try part C on your own, but when you plug in -2 for x, you should have gotten an output of 0. So f of -2 is 0. Okay, let's try example 2. Now, the process is going to be the same, we just have a new machine. Okay, we have new directions for our machine. And this time, this function, we are going to take x and square it, and then subtract 3. Okay, so first we are asked to find f of -1. So once again, just like we did in example 1, I'm going to replace every x with -1. So I have -1 squared. Notice I'm still using parentheses. Those are still important. And -1 squared means I do -1 times -1, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So this is +1 minus 3. And 1 minus 3 means that f of -1 is -2. Okay, let's try part B. Okay, evaluate f of 2/3. This one's a little trickier, but we can get through it. So again, I'm going to replace x with 2/3. So I have 2/3 squared minus 3. Okay, so again, what does it mean to square something? It means to multiply something by itself. So 2/3 squared means I do 2/3 times 2/3, which is 4/9. With fractions, you just multiply across. Okay, so I have 4/9 minus 3. All right, we're doing a whole fraction review here because I'm not just going to do 4 minus 3 and say this is 1/9. That doesn't make sense. When you subtract or add fractions, you have to have a common denominator, So right now, my denominator is 3, but I need a denominator of 9. So I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 9, which gives me 4/9 minus 27/9. And now I can go ahead and subtract my numerators. So 4 minus 27 gives me -23/9. So again, that one's a more challenging one for sure, but it's good to have a little fraction review. Okay, just like before, I would love for you to try part C. So go ahead and pause the video, try part C on your own, and then come back and check to see how it went for you. So pause the video, please. All right, so you should have gotten f of 0 to be -3. 0 squared is, of course, 0, and 0 minus 3 is -3. Okay, moving on to example 3. So example 3, we're stepping up the complexity a little bit because if you look at the equation, we have x in 2 spots here in the equation. But it doesn't really change how we're going to do things. Just like before, I'm going to change every x to -1 in this case. So f of -1, I'm going to have 8 times -1 cubed plus 2 times -1. Now, this is where PEMDAS is super duper important, order of operations. What I see all the time is students will do 8 times -1 first, and then they'll do -8 cubed and get some crazy number like 512. But what we need to do first is exponents. Exponents comes before multiplication. So I'm going to do -1 cubed, which means -1 times -1 times -1, which is just -1. And now I can do the multiplication. That's -8, and that's -2. And then I can go ahead and add those together. So I get f of -1 is -10. Okay, we're going to do this one last example here, another fraction one. So f of 3/2, again, I'm going to change every x in this equation to 3/2. What does it mean to cube something? It means to multiply something by itself 3 times. So just like we did with squaring the fraction, cubing a fraction works the same way. I'm just going to multiply straight across. So 3 times 3 times 3 gives me 27. 2 times 2 is 8. So I have 8 times 27 over 8 plus 2 times 3 over 2. Okay, now for this, when we multiply, this actually cancels out the fact that we are dividing by 8. Those cancel. And same thing here. So this just becomes 27 plus 3, which means that f of 3/2 is just 30. Okay, so that is our examples. I would like you to flip the page to the homework page. So the homework is to complete numbers 1 through 18. Numbers 1 through 18, and you must show work. Okay? Don't just write like -4. That's not good enough to get credit for the homework, okay? I want you to show me, okay, I'm actually writing out and plugging in 0 for x, and then I'm going to simplify it down to get my answer, okay? I want to see that you understand how to actually plug in a number for x and then evaluate it, just like we did in all the examples, okay? So you're completing the 2.2 homework, and then we will check over it the next time I see you.